I'm very proud to introduce you to our next guest. She is the mother of our late President John F. Kennedy and one of the truly great ladies of America. Ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Rose Kennedy.
Hello. It's nice to meet you.
It's nice to have you here. One of my spies saw you on your way to church this morning.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that wasn't fair of him.
Do you go every morning, Mrs. Kennedy?
Well, I go quite often. Yes. Very easy. Beautiful cathedral here, too.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, magnificent, really. I saw the nuns afterwards. I spoke to some of them because they're interested in mental retardation, too. Can you hear me? I seem to be
Oh, sure.
speaking.
Yes, you can. We can hear you. You can hear, can't you? Yes. I understand you have 25 grandchildren.
Yes, and perhaps 26 any minute.
Oh, marvelous.
Teddy is expecting a baby now, and Joan and he are down at Hyannis with my husband and some of the other grandchildren. Others of them, of course, have been out on the river trips, as you probably read.
Yes, we did. It sounds very exciting.
Yes, it does.
Do you worry about them doing that sort of thing?
Not very much. I'm not the worry. I guess.
Tell me, do you react the same way towards your grandchildren that you did to towards your own children?
Well, yes. I think my children have been very complimentary and have asked me different things about bringing up the children. And we're always interested in history and politics and whatever's going on. And we used to discuss it a good deal with my own children. Of course, we lived in Boston in the early days, and it was very easy there. I suppose it is in most every city, but there were so many souvenirs and mementos of the revolutionary days that it was very it was very easy to take them to Lincoln and Lexington. I showed them the Old North Church. And their grandfather had been mayor of Boston, so he was very proud of Boston. And he used to show them the common where the American boys threw snowballs at the British boys and at the British soldiers. And so that really stimulated their imagination a lot, different historical mementos. Jack, of course, was particularly fond of history. And then as they went on, of course, they grew more interested. And when they went to Washington and when their father was in Washington, that interest grew and grew, and they were able, of course, to meet people who were making history then later in their lives. They met Churchill, for instance, when we went to England. And they used to say that Jack was too inexperienced to be president. And I said, but he went to the Soviet when he was 18 or 19 years old. And some of the senators haven't been to the Soviet yet, even though they're 45 or 50. So that my children were very lucky, and they're trying to carry on the same tradition with their children. And they have maps on the wall, for instance, where Sergeant Shriver has gone, because he has traveled all over the world as the head of the Peace Corps. So he used to go to out-of-the-way places, and so his children used to watch on the map to see where he had been and where he was going, what he had found there, and sometimes accompany him.
Did you have a philosophy about raising your children? Because you said a moment ago.
Everybody has philosophies, but sometimes they don't come out just as we think. Yes, I always think that if you bring up the oldest ones the way you want the others to go, they will follow.
Is that right?
That's very interesting.
That's interesting indeed. Mrs. Kennedy told the cutest story this morning. I want you to repeat the story about the inoculations, how you would handle it with them.
We'd have, I don't know, perhaps 6 or 7 children, and we'd, when they were to be inoculated for diphtheria, so we'd bring the 2 oldest ones into the room where the doctor was first, and then they'd come out, and the younger ones would say, "Did he hurt? Did he hurt?" And the oldest ones would say, "No, he just drew a little picture in my arm." So then the next one would go in quite confidently and have the little picture in his arm, and so on and so forth down the line to the very youngest. And I think that works out in a great many things.
Yes. I think with a larger family, it's easier, don't you?
Yes, indeed it is. You have to, because otherwise you can't watch them all, swimming when they get older, going to dances and things. And if you ever know the brother that will keep an eye on his sisters, it's really...
Yes, indeed, that
And how
nice.
usually,
Yes.
sometimes they get interested in their own dates.
You have spoken a great deal about mental retardation. Is this because of your personal experience?
Yes, you see, we had 2 sons, and then this little girl came along, my oldest daughter, and she was mentally retarded. I tried to get help for her at that time, because first of all I consulted our family doctor, and then afterwards a child psychologist, and I went to Harvard College where they had a big department there, and different places, and different people were recommended to me. They all told me that she was mentally retarded, but when I said, what can I do? Where can I send her? There didn't seem to be any answer. And of course, I was very discouraged and really heartbroken because I didn't know really what to do to help the child.
Mm-hmm.
So then when our eldest son was killed in the Second World War, we decided we'd start the Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. Foundation, which was named after him, and which would devote the resources to research for mental retardation, because there were so many children born every year. You see, there are 5 or 6 million children in the United States who are afflicted in this way. And my husband thought if we could just find the source, or find out what causes it, it would be much more effective than trying to cure it after it
I
has
believe there
afflicted
are
people.
about 5 causes, aren't there?
Well, they don't know exactly, but there are different things that we can do, and that's what I try to present to people, so that we'll all work and try and get people to go for prenatal care, for instance, because that's very important. And we all know expectant mothers, so we can all urge them to go and see the doctor. Otherwise, perhaps they take the wrong medication, or perhaps they're having x-rays.
And the diet can be
And the diet is
wrong.
very important. And then after the baby is born, there are certain tests which can be given, the PKU test, for instance.
What is that?
Well, that's a very simple test. They take a drop of blood from the heel of the baby, and if it shows that there is deficiency in the baby's diet, then they can supplement that with the proper ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
And very often that will prevent mental retardation, which might have developed if this had not been done. Most medical people approve of this PKU test. There's been a little controversy about it lately, but most people do think that it's a very good idea, and it is mandatory in a good many states, not in all the states, but it is mandatory in 32 or 35 of them, I think. So that is very important. And then, of course, we talked about the measles vaccine.
Oh, yes, this is something you should hear.
Because so many of your children have measles between the ages of 1 and 12. And very often that leads to mental retardation. It's very simple to get the measles vaccine. And so we're urging all you mothers.
And it's not costly either, is
And
it?
it's not expensive, to have this inoculation against measles. Because, as you know, most all the children, it seems to me they used to get the children's diseases in the spring a good deal. But this would prevent so often mental retardation from developing. And
Mrs. Kennedy, excuse me, what are some of the common mistakes that mothers make when they discover they have a mentally retarded child?
well, I think some of them don't know really what to do. Of course, none of us knew. I didn't know what to do. Nobody knows exactly what to do. But now there are a great many, there's a great deal more information about it. And a great many more people who are trained. They have many more courses in medical schools, which they didn't used to have. And they have clinics where people can bring their children. And then nourishment is very, very important. And you see, a mental retardation occurs a great many times in the underprivileged areas. And that's, of course, a little different. I must talk about the education later. But it occurs because they're not properly nourished, and we can, of course, supplement their diets at school, etc., and that would help.
And in many cases, isn't it true that in many cases when a family has a retarded child, they try to hide it and
Yes, well, I
not
think
do
that
anything
used to
about
be
it?
so. I don't think that's true now. And I think we should all encourage these mothers, talk to them, tell them there's hope for these children. They can be taught, they can be even get jobs as they get older, which I was going to talk about a little later. There's no reason now to hide them or to think you have to keep them at home. They can have schooling. I think that 3/4 of the schools in this country provide instructions for these children.
That's marvelous.
And then, as I said, people do know much more about it. They can get jobs eventually, so that the picture is much brighter and encouraging than it used to be, and all the mothers and fathers should feel much more hopeful and really feel that it's a challenge, but so many things in life are challenging.
Indeed so. We are going to pause for a moment here. We'll be right back following these messages. Mrs. Kennedy, you said that your daughter was the third born. There were two older boys, Joseph and John. What was their reaction when they found out that their sister was mentally retarded?
Well, there wasn't any great ado about it. If you have a large family, you see some of them are very brilliant and some of them are not so brilliant. And she was a fairly good swimmer, and so we used to compliment her on her swimming or on her hairdo, as they say, or something like that after we'd congratulate the boys on their mental capacity, so that we brought them all along. Sort of, one of them would play tennis better than the others, and so we tried to sort of equalize it and not make any particular effort to make her conspicuous, but just let her sort of go along. She liked the younger children actually better than the older children. Of course, that brings me up to an interesting observation too. That is the question of the summer camps. We're trying to encourage people to have summer camps in the communities, and the Kennedy Foundation gives up to $3,000 to help a community establish a camp, a day camp. Mm-hmm. And you see, these children, first of all, a camp is a great help to a mother. I know from my own experience, because I had a governess for the child, but she didn't want to stay with the governess. She said the other children didn't have to have someone running around with them. Why should she? So she'd want to go off with them, want to go in a rowboat, for instance. She couldn't manage the rowboat like the others could, and of course I was in fear that some accident would happen to her, or that she went to the post office and she didn't come home with the others. I didn't know whether she had been kidnapped or whether she had gone in a different direction. So that these children are really a great worry to the mothers in the summer. So if you have a day camp, it does relieve the mothers for a few hours. And also these children will compete with children of their own potential, while they will not compete with children who are normal, who can swim and dive very well. But if they go to a camp where the other children are a little shy, or a little backward, or a little awkward in swimming or diving or playing ball, then they will try it too.
They feel more comfortable with it.
And it builds up their morale.
Surely.
And then they make friends among the other children, and they get used to taking instructions from somebody away from their own home. And it is tremendous help. And as I said, my own daughter, Mrs. Schreiber, has a camp on her own estate. Of course, fortunately, she has a large tract of land where there is a little lake, and they go on a rowboat. Somebody gave her a pony, so the children ride on the pony occasionally. Then they just throw balls, and they have automobile tires that they jump in and out of. I would visit them, and they had me jumping in and out of the
Oh, really?
automobile tire. Well, that's a very simple way of building up their their muscles and their physical capacity. So that, and the balls are not very expensive. They play ball, different kinds of ball together, or swings, and so they can keep busy for the whole day and have a lunch there and go home again at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Then, too, the most wonderful thing was that a great many of the girls from the junior league, from the junior college there in Washington, where she lives, helped her, volunteered to help her. Girls 16 or 17 come, and after a few days or weeks instruction, they begin to help these children. Each child has an older girl with her who helps her swim, or helps her throw the ball, or helps her. And it is a very, I think, a stimulating for these girls to see these other children and to help them, because, as I said to my own children, their time and their talents and their financial resources were not for their own particular benefit, but were to be used to help other people or to be devoted to some noble cause. And of course they did develop and did go into public life, which pleased us very much. But I think the children in this day and age, a good many of them, are aware of their responsibilities,
Oh, yes.
because so many of them went into the Peace Corps, as we all know.
Why was your daughter finally institutionalized, and
Well,
at what age did that happen?
It depends on personal circumstances. If there is a good school near your home, it isn't necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And if she has friends, but if she has no friends in your near your home, supposing she's privately tutored, the other children have their friends who come home with them from school, and she has nobody. You see, then that is a handicap for her, and difficult too. So in that case, I think she's better sent to boarding school or sent away for the school year.
At what age did this
But
take
that
place?
depends on the children. I suppose she was probably about 14 or 15. It depends,
I
as I
see.
said, on circumstances.
Well, what kind of a future can these children look forward to, Mrs. Kennedy?
Well, now, I was going to have some candles. I asked them to send some candles, but evidently they didn't. We started a project of making the John Fitzgerald Kennedy Hope candles, and perhaps some of you have seen them, because the children made about 140 dozen last year, I think, which they sold, and Bing Crosby's wife bought a lot for me. She was on the other show, wasn't she?
Yes. She was
She
with us
gave them for
recently.
Christmas presents.
Oh,
So
that's
sorry we
marvelous.
haven't got them today. And the children made them, and they get a great kick out of it, as they say, because they feel they're doing something creative. And
Where do these funds go?
original.
Toward helping the
Yes,
education?
rather than just running elevators or mowing lawns or something that's more or less repetitive. So that we've had this project, and then from that, from making the candles, they become used to an environment different from their own home environment, and then later they're qualified to take jobs in the community. So that we feel that that project has been a great success. And then very often, for instance, the federal government now has 3,000 of these people working for them. When Jack was in the White House, there was a young man there who was doing upholstery work on the chair, on some of the chairs in the White House, and he is still there. I inquired the other day. And then Mr. Dillon, the Secretary of the Treasury, hired some of them to work in the Treasury Department, carrying mail or doing work like that.
Mm-hmm.
And they were a great success, and he said he had no reservations in recommending them. They don't quit their jobs. They're not job hoppers, I think you call them. And they're very anxious to show what they can do. And of course their parents and their friends are very encouraged because they know then that they will go on to something and for the rest of their lives.
Is
really.
your husband as interested in this
Yes,
project
he
as you?
tremendously. Of course, he really worked it out in the beginning, as I said, and started the whole movement. And it has spread tremendously. And now they're having it. I spoke in Sweden last year, 2 years ago, about it. There they combined with the Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts. The Girl Scouts and the Boy Scouts work a lot with the retarded.
Where can interested people get more information about
Well, they
this
can get it by
program?
writing to the President's panel. President Johnson has a big panel now. That's
We're
still
showing it
working
on the screen right
We're
now.
showing it on the screen. And President Kennedy started it. And of course, they have money now that's given to the different states and the different communities to help these children. And now teachers are trained so that they can teach these children, because it really is necessary to have a special training in order
Indeed.
to know how to appeal to them.
Your son Bobby has said that you are a great campaigner. Are you
Yes.
going to campaign more?
I don't know. I told you about the story he told about when I was campaigning
Oh,
the last
this is
time.
great.
He said, Mother, now one handicap Jack has is that people think he's too young to be president, that he doesn't know any more than he's only 42 or 43. He doesn't know enough to be president. and he looks young. And Mother, if you go campaigning and you look young, that will emphasize.
He wanted you to look older?
So I'm going to add 5 or 6 years onto your life. Instead of saying you're 63 or 64, I'm going to say you're 72 or 73. Because that will help Jack.
What was your honest reaction to
I
that?
said that was the greatest sacrifice a woman could be asked
Indeed it was.
to add years onto your life.
Well, you must be a very, very proud mother.
So we went on that way, but and then he also tells the story because when I was a little girl, my father was in politics. He was in Congress too, and he took my sister and me to Washington. We met President McKinley, and Bobby tells the story. Oh, Mother's been campaigning for a long time. My grandfather used to carry her around in his arms. She met President McKinley, or maybe it was President Lincoln. So,
you have a birthday coming up, don't you?
yes, but I'm not.
Did you come in from Hyannisport last night?
Yes, we're down there for the summer, and as I said, some of the children haven't arrived because they've been on these different tours, and but they all will be there. The 26 of them later, and they're all. They come to my house for the movies and the tennis because the movies are there. We've always had movies because my husband used to be in the moving picture business. And so they congregate there very happily and not always very quietly.
Well, I want to tell you, you have made a lot of people, you're doing a great job for a worthy cause, and your appearance here today has made many viewers happy, but I assure you no one...
And I wonder if we've covered everything now.
I think we have. Is there anything that you want to mention?
I don't know whether they're... no, and then they can get information in their own community. And as I said, the most effective way of combating the measles and of having the vaccine is for the different communities to have one day. If all of you are going to go to your health department one day with your children for the measles vaccine, it would be much easier for you to understand it and for the people, the poorer people, the people in the disadvantaged areas to understand that they would bring their children to a certain place on a certain day, and then it would be done. Some communities have done that. The state of Utah, for instance, has the best record on this particular thing.
Mrs. Kennedy, if you'd like to remain, we do a little closing medley where we all sit down and we'd certainly like to have you be a part of it.
I think that I will have to get back to it.
Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you.